Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lessons in Leadership. For those who are new here, our host, Dermot Buffini, is the CEO of Buffini and Company. It's the largest training and coaching company in North America. Buffini and Company holds a very unique position in the marketplace. They lead more agents, they coach and train more brokers than any other company in the real estate industry. They've had a major impact in our industry, and they've trained and coached more than 3 million professionals in 41 different countries. They've helped millions of agents, brokers, managers, and owners not only build great and lasting businesses, but also build fulfilling lives. Dermot has been recognized as an RISMedia newsmaker and as a finalist for the San Diego Business Journal's CEO of the Year. And under his leadership, the San Diego Union Tribune has recognized Buffini and Company as one of the top workplaces in San Diego. We're honored to have Dermot here today, where he'll be talking leadership insight with EXP CEO Leo Perea. Leo, I'm sure you're going to find, is an interesting, dynamic leader who's helping to move our industry forward in these trying times. Please give a warm welcome to Dermot Buffini and Leo Perea.
All right, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Lessons in Leadership. It's been a while. I'm your host, Dermot Buffini, and we have a great guest joining us today, Leo Perea. Leo, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, Leo, you didn't start. I know you joined EXP in 2022, became its CEO in 2024. Fantastic year to start. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Today, you're overseeing 81,000 agents in 24 countries, but you didn't start there, did you? That's not where you started life in the real estate space. Can you share us just a little bit of background in your kind of journey in real estate?
Yeah, no, I started as one of us, which makes me very unique. I'm the only CEO of a publicly traded company that actually did this for a living. So I got licensed in college, and I sold real estate full time for almost 16 years. So very different route that I think most corporate executives go through. I think a lot of my peers come from other Fortune 500 companies or more of that corporate consulting banking route. Versus I was hawking houses one at a time, sitting in kitchen tables and driving folks around, listening to their hopes and dreams and helping them achieve the American dream.
Yes, it certainly is very different, and I think that's why you're a champion of the realtors. To be honest with you, I think what I know about you, championing their success, providing the environment for them to succeed, is very paramount to you. So let me ask you this: so from real estate agent, you also got into the technology space.
Yeah, so while selling real estate, I started several other ventures. The first one after building a team was starting a very large hard money lending platform, so private lending. And a lot of my journey has been, taking lemons and making lemonade. So post-financial crisis, financial distress in the financial system in the United States, I saw that the rules were changing on how banks lent money to investors, and thought to myself, I think this is a good idea, and directionally accurate. It was a pretty good idea, and I started a business that ended up doing hundreds of millions of dollars in private lending origination before it became an asset class. And that was my first time building tech for myself. So I'm not a technologist. I did go to school to study it, and that was my goal. And then halfway through college, I decided I want to be in real estate, so never did anything with my degree. Then as I was building that business, I wanted public record data inside of my platform. Interesting part of the origin story that not a lot of people know is I called a bunch of companies that sold data. They quoted me entirely too much money I didn't have the budget for. And in November of 2015, Zillow was hosting a hackathon in Seattle to debut a data API that they had acquired through a company called Redsley. There was 200 some teams competing, and we went just to participate, to get access to the data, and it turns out we won the whole thing. Not because we're technologists, it's because we were some of the few people in the room that actually sold houses, right? So there's engineers from Google and Uber and a whole bunch of intimidating places, but they never spent time in a car with a consumer. And so we won the whole thing. I had zero intent of building a real estate prop tech company, and a couple of folks in that room, like Alex Perillo was one of the judges, and Bob Hale and these kind of titans of our industry said, hey, if you turn that into a product, I might be interested in. And then my technology company, which was called Remind, was born purely out of necessity of scratching an itch.
Yeah, well, it's also, but it's the right itch that you're scratching. And I think that's where what I see with technology and people come out with great ideas, but it's not attached to the reality of real estate. And I think that is a unique differentiator for you.
Yeah, then we went on to scale to become part of 80% of agents' workflows across the United States by access through MLS. So whether it was public record to complete workflow from data entry to search to contract negotiations and closing.
Well, it's quite an interesting journey to go from being like a serial entrepreneur to, as you said to me, my first proper job as the CEO of a publicly traded company. How is that transition for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because when after I sold my last two companies, I spent most of my time spearfishing in South Florida. One, because it was the hardest thing I've ever done. So raising capital, flying 200 days a year was probably more than I had signed up for mentally and spiritually from being away from my kids and my wife that much. And my wife, Ariana, ran enterprise sales. So she was on the road 100 days on her own. And so, I think part of life is understanding the season that you're in and really having an honest conversation with yourself if that's what you want to do. And to quote Dave Ramsey, you can live like nobody else, so you can live like nobody else. And I'm pretty sure I heard your brother say something to that same thought process in my early 20s when I would attend Buffini seminars. But the reality is, like, I think we constantly need to ask ourselves what it is we want our life to look like. And when, as you're answering that question, there are moments of trade-off where you say, okay, this is a sprint because it's going to get me to somewhere I'm going. But then it's like, what lifestyle design are you building? So when I was introduced to Glenn, the founder of EXP, I was super clear. I was like, well, first of all, I'm not sure I can have a job. I don't know how to. And he said, that's exactly what I'm looking for. As he put it, he wanted a bare knuckled entrepreneur who just, it's in our blood, as he put it. And secondly, I told him, I was like, I don't know how to have a job. I've never had one. I don't know that I have the understanding of it. He goes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And being an entrepreneur is not a choice for me, I guess. It's like wired into my DNA now. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like I have a job. I feel like I just run a much larger startup than most of the ones I did in the past.
No, well, we need a few entrepreneurs. Now, it's funny you mentioned that because, on your journey and your early part in your career, we actually coached you. And so the other day I pulled up your real strengths profile. Okay, this is what we used to coach you to. Okay, now if you look in there, you'll say straight in the middle, it says entrepreneur. See that? But it also has another great attribute, which is the Olympian attribute, which means you are tenacious, determined, and resilient. Taking the job on in 2024. I mean, it's the most challenging, most disruptive year. I don't know if in my 25 years of being around real estate, I don't know of a more disruptive, chaotic, crazy year. So you're up for the challenge. Tell me can you give me kind of a bit of
I think it's a really cool story because when Glenn reached out, he actually asked me if I wanted to be our chief technology officer. And we had never met. It was a mutual friend introduced us. And I actually kind of very politely got off the phone very quickly because I said, look, I can play one on TV. I don't like it. I'm not actually an engineer. It was probably the least fun I've had in leadership just because I'm not technical. So I can't write code. So when I led a team of agents, I could outdo anyone at anything, meaning I could close better at listing appointments. I could script better. I could role play most people better. But when I got into leading a tech company, I couldn't write or read code. And it gave me a healthy amount of insecurity as well as imposter syndrome, or any of those words you can think of. Because whether it was selling, building, lending, like there was nothing I couldn't learn like through and through. Like I could read a note. I knew what was enforceable, what was not enforceable. When we were rehabbing or flipping houses, I'd walk around with a tennis ball and put it on the ground. And if something wasn't level, I didn't need to be a civil engineer. I could figure it out. If something was delayed and someone blamed the permit, I'd go down to the county and pull the permit and be like, well, you submitted this yesterday instead of 6 weeks ago. So I'm not paying you. I'm actually going to charge back. And now, like, it's hard to BS me until I got into tech. And then I was like, I don't know if this is a big problem or a tiny problem. I don't know if this is this 2 weeks or is this 6 months? Like, I'm not sure what I'm asking for. And so I immediately turned him down because I have that experience. And then he actually reached back out and said, why don't we hang out for a day next time you're near me? And we spent a day together in the West Coast the next time I flew out west. And he asked me, so for the folks that know, Glenn is kind of that nerdy tech guy. He's actually a brilliant salesperson because he sold me without me noticing what he was doing. But he said, so, okay, you have a track record. What are you going to do next? I said, I'll probably start another company. He said, great. What's the idea? I want to invest in it. I said, I don't have it yet. He said, so what are you going to do 6 to 12 months? I said, well, I'm figuring that out, kind of taking my time. He said, I have a little company that became a big company, right? So we went kind of parabolic growth. And he goes, now I have big company problems and I need somebody to just help me fix stuff. He's like, come hang out for 6, 12 months, kind of in the background, not forward facing. And when you get your next idea, we could either buy it and you run it and we're partners, or I can invest in it and high five you on the way out. And so it was like, okay. And then, he made me make a couple promises. One was that if I saw anything that didn't make sense, that I would undo it, right? So if you see bureaucracy, break it. If we're doing silly stuff that you don't agree with, just undo it. And also he said, I want you to lean in on the tech side because, as he put it, I'm bilingual, that I speak real estate and tech. And he says that's a hard combination to find in real estate.
For sure.
And so 6 months in, he said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but you're touching just about everything in the enterprise. I had a kind of innocuous title. It was president of our affiliated companies. So I sold off some stuff. I bought some stuff. I signed enterprise contracts. I undid enterprise contracts. Then he said, I'm going to change your title to chief strategy officer. Harvard Business Review says that's kind of a shadow CEO. You can still touch everything. You're a named officer of the company. I participate in every earnings call, but still to that point, I was not very public facing from like the agent side, the industry side. So it was still kind of in the background. And then 6 months later, he asked me, he said, hey, I'm ready. And I said, for what? He said, for you to be CEO. I'm like, I'm good. And I actually told him a sentence that I'm having the most fun I've ever had being the fun uncle, not being dad. My whole career, I'd always been dad and versus the fun uncle. And so I kind of put that to bed. And 6 months later, he tried again, and he even told the board, he's like, this guy doesn't want to do it. And I said, like, everything's great. I like this. And then March 15th of 2024, I was actually fishing in the Keys with 3 of our agents. I got that Inman headline that NAR had settled, and it got really loud that weekend. And the loudness was coming from our agents who were genuinely worried about feeding their families, right? So a lot of real fear and confusion. And I spent that weekend with Glenn on the phone and inside counsel and outside counsel. And we had to make a decision. And I said, hey, the world is going to be different going forward. And we have to make a decision. Are we going to be quiet because we're defending a multi-billion-dollar litigation? Or if I get loud, this could cost us more money. We don't know where this is going to go. And I don't know if you recall that Monday on March 18th, I went live on YouTube and 53,000 people showed up. Jack Miller called me the next day and said, you probably have garnered the single largest audience ever in the history of organized real estate at one point, virtual or in person. And that moment showed me that I'm not that special. It was just a lot of people were starving for information. Not too many people were willing to go on record. And so I think by that Friday, Glenn was on a call with a bunch of leaders in our company, and they said, hey, we're ready for him to be CEO. I think that Sunday I got a call from him. And he's like, we're announcing it on Monday. And I tried going into my objection handling script. And Glenn said, no, you didn't hear me. I wasn't asking, like, you are the CEO. We're filing the papers at the SEC. As the agents put it, they wanted a wartime general.
They wanted which? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
They wanted a wartime general.
Yeah. That's what's needed. We're not in peacetime, that's for sure.
And so to your question is, I didn't choose it. I tried very hard to say no. But once I realized that that's the moment we were in, I've fully embraced it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm excited to be here. And that's the interesting part of leadership. Sometimes it's when you don't want it the most that you end up in the seat.
Well, and what I hear, and thanks, Sharon. It's a great story. It is a great story, and I know it's only starting, right? I really do. I'm sure for you, I hear your passion and your enthusiasm, your excitement for where you are and embracing the seat that you're in. But also, what I hear in your story is a lot of self-awareness. Self-awareness of like, I've done that. I don't want to do that. I want to go spearfishing. I want to have fun. I don't need to do that anymore. Like, I don't need to start that over again. The second part is understanding the game of technology and how it impacts and how it can help us all achieve our goals. And then having the humility to go, yeah, but I don't know this part. I don't want to go deep. I'm not a technical guy. I am a visionary guy who can see the application of it. I know how it can actually help people achieve their goals. There's tremendous self-awareness. So let me ask you, just as you've grown as a leader, obviously as an entrepreneur, it teaches you what you're good at, bad at, not good at, in the whole deal. Who's kind of influenced your leadership style the most?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because I read obsessively. If I like something by an author, I then go read anything they've ever written, and it's kind of cool to see their progression and thought process. And one of the things that I've just been hyper aware of is, I think there's an almost too much admiration for a person without kind of seeing their whole character as a human being. So like the ones I've admired over time are my father and a mentor that was like a father. And I think I would encourage everyone to not romanticize or put any one person on a pedestal and try to get the lessons that are important. Right. And for me, the best leaders I've experienced are the ones that are in most curiosity, right? Mm-hmm. I think a good leader demonstrates versus talks, and more importantly, asks a lot of questions, right? Like the best leaders I've met are the ones who just ask folks questions that guide them to self-discovery in their own leadership journey, versus the folks that just kind of spit instructions from the mountaintop. And I love the process of co-creating with leaders, right? So if the folks that are in my leadership team, we get together every 90 days and we have a list of what's the most pressing kind of, and by the way, this list could change the day of. I actually just did this exercise last 2 weeks ago in Texas, and I had a whole agenda and I threw it out, and it turned into a workshop where our CIO, our Chief Innovation Officer, gave us a workshop on some AI tools specifically for building websites and apps. So not just the generative AI that is what I think most people are focused on right now, but like apps like Lovable and Cursor and Windsurf, where you can actually build a single property website, if you will, for the realtor translation. For us, it's like a workflow, like the Join app in Peru. And we are now entering a new part of society in the world and business where everyone can build software. And it's terrifying and super exciting at the same time, because there's no more bottlenecks and gatekeeping. And so frontline individual contributors are going to vastly become more powerful and important and functional in organizations. And I think we're about to live through a time period where middle management disappears. Almost, I'd be as bold to say as the concept of management disappears. I think individual, like I view myself as an individual contributor, even though I'm the CEO. I'm belly to belly, boots on the ground, right? Like I'll tell my agents all the time, I'm like, hey guys, my day is exactly like yours. I have to make contacts, conversations, close, rinse and repeat. And I just do maybe differently, right? Because I'm maybe interacting with large teams, large brokerages, and vendors and negotiating much bigger deals, right? Like with Slack. But at the end of the day, we're just people, and we're attracting people to our tribe based on our value proposition of how we see the world.
Yeah, that's great. What challenges are you helping agents with today, and what are your what would you say are the top couple of conversations that you're having with with agents to encourage them, or what challenges are you helping them navigate at this time?
The same ones I've had for 23 years, right? It's first of all, understand what business you're in, right?
Right.
And there is no right or wrong, warm versus cold, inbound versus outbound. Everything, and having had this interesting, I call it my walkabout, where I was no longer in production and went on to build enterprise technology. But it was still interacting with humans, and I believe that any and all businesses that participate in capitalism have kind of the same thing. You deliver a product or service, and it's either reoccurring or transactional.
Mhm.
And you start with total addressable market, so TAM at the top of the funnel. There is a funnel that converts to an appointment, and an appointment that converts to a transaction. And it doesn't matter if we're selling houses, loans, software, or kids' vitamin gummies, right?
Mhm.
Like, there is this part of the funnel. There is your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, and then there's what's called LTV, lifetime value, not loan to value, lifetime value. And so in your business, you get a customer, right? So your CAC is probably more expensive than most because it's a high ticket price. And then that lifetime value, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you know what it is. Like, my guess is, I don't know, 8-9 months, right? Like, there's businesses where, from time of transaction to reoccurring revenue, so you can annualize or itemize that cost. And by the way, this is where agents completely miss the boat, and where I rant, where it's like let's say you have a high CAC, which we all do, and look at that as a Zillow Flex Realtor VIP, kind of that success fee, which, by the way, I don't vilify. It is. And those business models are fantastic if you then actually put them into sphere of influence marketing database like the ones you teach. And then that next CAC goes down to zero, right? Because interacting with someone on social isn't 40% of the commission up front, right? Which is what a lot of those success fees sit at. So first of all, like, I'm always like, what business are you in and what activities can you control?
Mhm.
And then once you decide to go into the team building, if you decide to, and I'm quite opinionated on that. I think too many people build teams because they think it's cool versus they should, right? It's a team building, to me, is a leadership journey, which is a different business and a different experience. And then it's its own journey in and of itself that most people don't actually proactively and on purpose to go on. And it's hard. And I think there's a lot of folks who probably have a better balanced life experience by being a solo producer and not needing the ego that comes with having a team.
Yep.
And one of the things I do say controversially all the time, and I'll say it right now, is I think once a year you should have an exercise where you see what you earn per hour, and you take your 1099 divided by 2080. And if you could provide equal to or greater lifestyle for your family, you should have an honest conversation with yourself if you should be in this industry. Because too many people sacrifice too many dinners, too many games, too many of the things that are finite and irreplaceable. So I think this business is phenomenal because it can provide you in a way that nothing I've ever seen from a barrier of entry, from a startup perspective. But don't do it at the cost of your family in moments that you can't replicate.
Yeah, and obviously, I know I've experienced that. It sounds like you've experienced that. You got to go there to know it, and like, But I love the practical coaching aspect of that. And I'll be honest with all the teams that we coach, the first part of our coaching with teams is to ask them, why did you start this? And a lot of times we're actually coaching people out of being a team because they shouldn't be one. They did it because it was kind of the trendy thing to do. And again, it's like, well, what's next in my career? So therefore I must have a team. But you should not have a team if you don't like managing people or leading people and you like moving by yourself. So, that is, I love that, of like, what business are you in? What lifestyle do you want to produce? What's your hourly rate, to do an evaluation, or where are you spending your time and you're maximizing it? What are the distractions you see right now for realtors in the industry that you're going?
So and again, this is more evergreen answer. I think if you're wired as an entrepreneur, you have this creativity and this desire to build 0 to 1. And so what I see happen, and I am no exception to this rule, by the way, I'm not speaking in judgment. This is from experience. What we do is we build something really cool, and then we get bored, and then we unfortunately go do something distracting and or blow it up out of pure kind of need for that excitement. And I see it over and over and over and over and over. The amount of times where someone's like, oh, I'm going to go start this, this, and this, right? Or I'm going to expand. I'm like, you're going to expand out of your local market and you do $28 million a year, right? Like there is a math problem for everything. And, you know, I talk about math a lot. Like I have one agent who has a 31% market share in a town of 80,000 agents, right? And I told him last time we talked, I was like, I don't think you can get past that. I think, you know, now we focus on building title and mortgage and all the ancillary services, right? And he actually called me back 2 months later, goes, I just got 2,000 lots. I'm going to get the 50%. So you were wrong, which is awesome, right? But when I have agents telling me they're doing, you know, 100 units and they're like, I'm going to go focus on ancillaries. I'm like, no, get to 500 units, get to 1,000 units, go really deep. And, you know, when I see people talking about expanding borderless, I'm like, well, first of all, why? Expansion only, in my experience, works hyper niche down, right? Meaning you have a customer you're following around, you have a national funnel that focuses on a very specific niche that works. I was just on with an agent who's crushed it in a 5-county area in the Carolinas, and they sell new construction, so they just got some land over the border in Tennessee. Like that makes sense. But when someone's like, hey, I have a sphere of influence database business that's pretty personality driven, meaning by the team leader, and now you want to go do it, you know, a 4-hour plane ride away, like a different time zone. I mean, I can almost tell you with a 99% of certainty that's not going to work. You're going to spread yourself thin, and you're going to have to kind of shut it all up, shut it all down, and blow it back up again.
You know, I can validate everything you're saying. I've been in the coaching industry for 29 years, and we work with 40 different industries and entrepreneurs all over the world. There's nothing more dangerous than a successful entrepreneur. There's nothing more dangerous, because you say it's almost like, I got to start this new thing in order to grow. I love what you're saying about like, hey, no, if you're here, get better at it. Stick to your knitting.
Well, and again, there's a math problem for everything. Like the law of diminishing returns is a very real math problem. So like if like, let's just say you spend $1 to get 3 back in any vertical niche industry across the board. Markets are normally segmented by either, you know, geography, right? Like a 10-mile radius, or just total addressable market on what you can spend on the internet, right? So, you know, my encouragement is to go as deep as you can with getting an acceptable rate of return for dollars or effort. And then from there, you know, how do you leverage that and systemize it to as much as possible? And then I would encourage you to do something adjacent and, you know, a creative, right? So whether that's affiliate or, you know, how it works, but I kind of see people do this kind of thing where it's not any of those words I just used.
No, for sure. And it's so disruptive. It's so disruptive. And we have seen people for years getting distracted by different models, downlines, you name it. And at the end of the day, we come back and go to what the question you, it's like, what business are you in and where do you make your living?
So funny you said that. I run the biggest downline business, and what I always tell people is, you know, the most attractive thing is production. And so the way I encourage folks to do it is like, the beauty of our model in that sense is like, it's a creative if it doesn't take you away from what you do, right? So when I was a highly productive agent, I used to get asked all the time to coach people, and I would actually tell them to call you or Ferry or whatever your favorite guru is, because I did the math. And even if someone were to pay me $2,500 an hour, if I had a full hour to teach first principles in real estate, that would have been role playing with my 23 buyers agents or listing agents, right? And what I knew is if I actually spent that 1 hour concentrated and got their conversion rate up from 50 to 60, that was actually a much better use of my personal time, just by my total investment in leads and conversion ratios. And so, you know, where I normally say, hey, it's like if you open up your world and allow somebody to kind of eavesdrop with a webinar link, then that's a creative. But the coaching business is a full-on other business that I don't suggest most agents go into.
Yes. All this gray hair was hard earned. Okay. But here's why, the reason I bring that up is because I think in the brief conversations we've had, I see you as that's the added benefit downline. Like that's the cascade effect of running a really good business. That's kind of like the cherry on the sundae, but it's not the first thing. First principles is to have a successful business, to have a successful system, to be well trained in it, demonstrate referral, demonstrate professionalism, get referrals so that you can encourage people in. And I think that is a huge differentiator, because I see that as a massive distraction in a lot of people in the industry. And I think what's refreshing is where you go, yeah, we do that. We created it, and here we go. Where do you start here? I think that's the huge difference.
Well, I always like to remind people that there is no rev share without revenue. So my obsession and my first and all concentration goes to production. Like we're the single largest brokerage on the planet by agent count and transaction count. In 2024, we operate in 24 countries and helped 518,000 families buy or sell or rent real estate in those countries. Mm-hmm. Today, we're actually active in 27. We just launched 3 this year. But like I wake up and go to bed thinking about how do we support agents transacting real estate, and everything else is a byproduct of that.
I think that is a unique differentiator in that space, 100%. Now, I mean, part of this is to help people develop themselves as leaders, and I think a lot of times entrepreneurs don't see themselves in that space. Agents don't see themselves in that space. What leadership qualities do you look for in somebody when you're bringing them on board in your leadership team?
So at this level, I'm looking for past performance, right? And so one of the interesting parts of my journey, which by the way was accompanied with a lot of imposter syndrome, was when I raised capital for Remine, because in my mind, and the story I told myself is I'm just a realtor, right? Like I went to a public university, got an art degree in web design. I am not Stanford, Harvard educated. I did not go work at McKinsey or Goldman. Like I'm a realtor. And as I'd walk into pitch what was arguably the most sophisticated capital on the planet, there was a lot of fear and insecurity around that. And one of the really cool parts, one is I do believe that capital is a pure meritocracy. Like nobody actually cared about my background. They just wanted to know that I was a domain expert and I could answer TAM, CAC, LTV, all of and then gross margin to net margin to EBITDA to adjusted EBITDA. And I learned this whole other vocabulary, which ironically enough is the reason I'm qualified to run a public company, right? If I hadn't gone through that finishing school, I would not be able to hang with earnings calls. But I also had a list of questions when I walked into the room, like how often do I get to pitch Founders Fund and Excel and Battery and the like Insight Partners, right? And so I had a list of questions, and one question got the same answer across the board by arguably the smartest money in the world. And I said, what is, in retrospect, based on past performance, the single most consistent sign of success in business pitches you see? Do you know what they all said? Past performance. They said our favorite entrepreneur is a third-time entrepreneur who's had an exit. And by the way, it's not what the TV and the internet show you of a 22-year-old Mark Zuckerberg. It's actually someone founding a company in their 40s, normally in their 50s, who's had the shit kicked out of them a couple times, who is not moves fast and break things ideology that is presented as Silicon Valley. It's actually a married man or woman who has stuff at risk and has had some wisdom passed along. And so so what I look for in leaders is past performance and pedigree of experience, not of education, but like what have you done? What have people have followed you? And in the world we live in today, like it's impossible to hide who you are.
That's right. People are, nobody's invisible. But when you think of past performance, because what I hear in that is, one of the things that you look for in a business is resilience. Like, don't tell me about when the market's hot, especially when the turkeys fly in a hurricane. When the market's hot, everybody's selling, everybody's doing great. It's what did you do when things were tough? What happened when it hit the fan? By the way, you would not be I don't believe you'd be in the position you are today if you ever went to any of those schools. I don't think because you need IQ and you need the EQ of what's happening and how it feels. You know tangibly what it's like to go, I need to feed my family this week, and I don't know where the business is coming from, and I'm going to work every day to start it going, to get it going. Is part of the past performance the confession of failure?
1000%, right? And I don't think people appreciate, especially younger people.
Yeah.
I was just coaching someone who just got into a leadership role who's a bit younger than me, and that was actually my one piece of advice. You know, it's because he had to meet with the board for the first time and kind of present his case. And I said, what you should do is embrace radical transparency in who you are. And because one of the things I've learned along the way is when you're not being your most authentic self, you're putting on an act by definition, right? And I think people don't kind of quite comprehend that part of the story. And I believe that when you're not your most authentic self, it requires a lot of energy. It's exhausting to play a character, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what I hear, and I do appreciate that, because I hear, like, I think the thing that inspires me the most is not the success. It's the story. It's the, hey, what did it feel like when you wanted to give up? You know, right now we've got a lot of folks, and they're guilty because they're having their best year ever. And then we have people who are ready to quit. They're like, I can't do this. I've had enough. Because the crash from being the possibly, the turkey in the hurricane and realizing I'm not an eagle after all, that's crushing. And, so what advice do you have for both of those groups? You got the folks who are, I could probably guess, but what advice do you have for both groups of people right now?
So one of the things, then you guys were probably one of the first people to ever give me a test, right? Is to have, like, my operating thesis in life is to have an honest conversation with yourself, right? And so whether it's, your strength finder insights, the DISC profile, AVA, pick your poison, is to first really, really understand how you're wired and what your God-given gifts are. And the reason I believe that is because I obsess kind of with the psychology of how the brain's wired. And it's having an honest conversation with where your passion lives, right? I think the statement, do something you're passionate about, you never work a day in your life, is completely overused and not specific enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think passion and joy comes from progress, right? There's a lot of psychological studies that show that. And so if you truly understand how you're wired and what your gifts are, you can actually hold yourself accountable in any market cycle, right? Because there will be good times and there will be bad times. And so when you are crushing it and there's some level of guilt, I would encourage you to just hear it. Don't give it meaning, make it bad or good. And then just kind of focus on first principles again of where you need to concentrate, and remind yourself, like, winter is coming. It always does. And so, save as much as you can, prepare yourself for a correction. And then if you were in that crushing defeat, again, be honest with yourself. Is it because you were a creature of the market cycle, which we all have been at least once? And then was your business controllable? Like, if I sit down with you and I start asking you questions, like, I think agents are surprised, because, like, before we start, I'm like, how long you been licensed? What did you do last year? Units and volume, listings to buy sides, average price, average revenue per deal. Where did those deals come from? Can you actually point to it? Was it, referral based? Was it inbound? Right. What was your CAC? CAC is completely different if you're paying a success fee versus paying for it up front versus sending out mailers. Like, because some people are like, oh, I don't have any CAC. I'm like, do you send mailers? Do you send emails? Do you, like, there is CAC at some point. Like, show me your credit card. Did you take people to dinner? Right?
Yes, sir.
And so until you're willing to have that conversation with yourself, you don't know how to self-audit. Because one of the things that I talk about a lot is, like, let's say you have a down year, you're down 10% and you're beating yourself up. In context to the market you serve, is if your market's down 20% and you're down 10%, you're outperforming the market by double digits. You should be celebrating.
Right. And it's a great perspective to have. For our clients, it's like, hey, work that referral base, work that, approach them. It's it is the lowest cost of acquisition. But at the same time it's like, as you said, having that analysis of where does my business come from? In our system, we know that if you make 20 contacts to people who know you, trust you, you're going to generate 3 referrals, and those 3 referrals are going to turn into 1 sale. Now, in today's market, I would say you got to do more than 20. You've got to do, that's kind of the baseline. But at the end of the day, having that formula, I love what you're saying because it resonates with what we do. It's like, find out where they're coming from, what activities, measure the activities you have to do to produce the result. I want to be respectful of your time too. You're dropping a lot of gold here. But I'd love to know from you, what's your best advice at this? And it doesn't, and I like in your answers, you're not just getting stuck in today. You're talking about like, this is what you do, good times, bad times. But tell me, what's the best advice you have for somebody who might be running a brokerage, somebody who might be running a team, somebody who might be an agent? Can you give me kind of your top tips for right now for this season?
Well, so I gave you mostly evergreen answers. This will be a locked in time and irrelevant answer because that's how time works. But June of 2025, I would be telling everyone to obsess with AI, both from speed to lead. Because I think like I've been talking about this kind of obsessively for 45 days now. I talk about AI. I think people's eyes glaze over because they either think I'm talking about ChatGPT or I'm like way out in the future and talking about agentic workflows. But I'm talking about it from purely speed to lead. And so I'll tell you a story. I had an agent a month ago share a story with me where a consumer put a prompt into ChatGPT that said, who is the most investor-friendly agent in my market? My agent's name came up, the consumer name, website, and email. The consumer clicked on the email, sent my agent an email asking for an appointment regarding investment property. We gave some of our agents a co-pilot that auto drafts responses, does the calendar, think of like a Calendly function. And my agent was at home on a Saturday playing with his son, saw the email, it auto drafted. He was able to like in 30 seconds say this is good, hit send. The consumer was blown away by the level of like 3 paragraphs with appointment availability without disrupting his workflow and his daily thing he was doing with his kiddo. And the consumer responded, blown away by the speed. That Tuesday, so 3 days later, they were on a call, 30 minutes, and 14 days later, they were under contract for $300,000 all cash on a rental property, right? So again, very specific. It's not like their first-time home buyer, like all the stuff that goes with it. But what I want people to hear from that example is speed to lead, right? Because I don't care if it was 23 years ago when you were coaching me or today, the speed to lead is everything, right? People are browsing in that moment, make the decision in that moment. If you can't get them to click through and engage with you, cold or warm, right? And then I will make the statement that in 36 months from now, we'll never search on search again. Everything will be generative LLM. And so, I would give everyone the homework assignment to ask ChatGPT the same type of question that would typically get you to appear on a search result in Google today. And if you don't appear in a chat prompt for the same question or words, actually ask ChatGPT what you need to be doing to create the authority on the internet for you to actually be the result set in a prompt.
Brilliant, brilliant. Totally agree. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of folks get very afraid of technology, and we've had this from, the real estate business is going out of business every year since I've been in it, right? Something's going to come along that's going to wipe it out. It hasn't. I don't see it happening. But what I hear from what you're saying too is, and what I'm doing is I'm just playing around with AI. Play with it. Don't be afraid of it. A lot of people back in the day were afraid of Facebook. It's like the best way to learn something is just engaging it. And then it sounds like you guys are doing a lot to help your agents go, look, we'll do the hard work for you. We'll train you in it. We'll get you the tools. And I think, again, that's you thinking from your customer's perspective because you were one. Last question, and then we're going to wrap up. Tell me what you're most excited for in this season, personally and professionally.
So, for me, it's always my family. I'm super clear. My daughter's 10. She just did a rock concert over the weekend at a local spot and covered Nirvana with School of Rock.
Oh,
And
that's
my son is obsessed with the jiu-jitsu, and we are competing in a third time in the last 6 months. And what's really cool is watching them get obsessed with a craft and fall in love with the process of learning. And then I think it's like super aware because I'm in peak dad season, if you will, and coupled with the disruption that's coming from AI. Like, I'm thinking a lot about like what's the future look like for them, and I'm all in on being a human. I'm all in on EQ and what I can teach them because, so this is the bright side, because I know when I talk about AI, I normally make people sad, but I believe that we're about to be living through a time where human experience is going to be at a premium and live experience is going to be at a premium. So what that translates to is belly to belly scripts, experience, right? How your open houses feel, how your experience if they visit your office feels, how you follow up with the human interaction. And that's that handwritten note, right? You taught me that, right? Like, by the way, if you're in the top 1,000 producers in the country, you get a handwritten note from me, whether you're at EXP or not, right?
Wow.
Because that's unreplicatable and it's unique. And, I think the silver lining that people should be happy about is like, look, during COVID, we thought, we'd all going to become hermits and never leave the house again, and everything was going to be virtual. And as soon as it was allowable, we ran into being in community again. And we're a tribal species that loves each other, and we're by ourselves. We actually go crazy. We need it. So I'm all in on humanity.
Well, we need people like you, Leo, in this industry. What I appreciate about you is you're just not about your own brand and your own team. You want to see the industry healthy. You want to contribute from your experience. And I'm just very thankful that you're around at this time and that you've got the perfect balance of IQ, EQ, data, the relational aspect, and you're looking ahead. And I'm excited to continue to watch what you do. And I'd encourage anybody in here to check Leo out too. And so Leo, thank you so much for your time. We have a replay video available of the webinar that'll be available shortly. So keep an eye out for the email link. And I'd suggest you watch this over again. Leo, you've dropped a lot of gold today, a lot of wisdom. And it's just great to chat with you. And I hope this is not the last time we chat this year. So thanks for your time today, Leo.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode of Lessons in Leadership. Until then, have a great year.